Yeah, I was listening to the radio today, and they were talking about birthers and how the Earth is flat, and Earth doesn't revolve around the sun anymore, and all these crazy beliefs that are coming out and pouring all over the media all the time. And I decided to research that a little bit for myself from these wild stories the guy's coming up with. Well, I finally ended up, looking at this guy here, and he's talking about, I know it's blurry to you, but it's blurry to me too, so we're on the same page. So, abortion bill will enable death penalty for miscarriages. I had to trace that out and find out what the heck is up with that. I mean, it's something that you'll have to check out. It's a comment in there also caught my attention. It says that these Christian terrorist fundamentalists are a threat to this nation, yet they're ignored by most, including the media, because they're white. Well, I'm white. Am I one of those terrorist fundamentalist Christians? I hope not. I don't want to be associated with that kind of thing. But yet, I kind of am, because I am a Christian. Okay? So they're talking all about this abortion bill, and I'm saying, that really isn't right. That's not right at all. It's morbid. It's a monster. It's wrong. So if I'm a member of that party of which I know, we all know, which would be Republican or conservative and Christian, that seems to be a bad combination there. Well, my principles aren't necessarily wrong unless I blindly or knowingly support that bill. However, I don't support it, so it's, where do I fit in the scheme of things of all this stuff that's going on out there? Anyways, after listening to this guy talk, I had a few real concerns there. This is thedailycost.com. It's dailykos.com is where you find all this stuff. So I said, this left-wing Christian, is the opposite of a right-wing Christian. So I need to find a left-wing Christian to see, how we're in opposition, if there's a left and there's a right. And so I dumped off into that research a little bit. And I came across a couple interesting situations here where on this blog it says Christians may be attending a church that promote left-wing agendas and are counted as a left-wing Christian. But I mean, there must be a left-wing Christian church out there somewhere in order to have an opposition to a right-wing, right? I'm looking for churches. You probably can't see this either. But all those are listed churches: African Methodist, Episcopal, Alliance of Baptists, Diocese of the Armenian Church, Christian Methodist, Friends United Meeting, Korean Presbyterian, National Baptist Convention, Polish National Catholic, Serbian Orthodox, Ukrainian. It goes on and on and on. The last one listed is United Methodist Church. Now, I know people, that go there, and I never thought they were screwy. They don't really think I'm a screwy either, but I guess for the most part they're Democrats. They really are. So I did some more research and I got some definitions and came across something called the social creed. Well, the social creed, you read up a definition of that out of, say, Wikipedia. The social creed is influenced by the social gospel movement and the progressive politics of the early 20th century America. The church wrote and adopted the creed in 1908, and it has been altered through the years, although it still appears in the Book of Discipline of the United Methodist Church, following the social principles section. So I'm thinking, progressive politics and Christianity, in my opinion, well, there's too much hate out there with this global politics and the common good for everything when it gets down to calling me a terrorist. So I think there's some deterioration going on there between what we want to do and what we're actually doing. And I think that they're passionate principles that are meant only to do good. Unfortunately, the people that get into controlling that stuff are not controlled by God. They are controlled by somebody else, and it gets perverted and pretty much whacked. So then I came across this little thing. I wanted to share this with you if you want to listen to this guy for a minute. He is one of them who's talking about this social creed business.
Yes, I hope actually that what we say in the creed will not only be a collection repetition of things that we've said, but also will be a cutting-edge statement that will help the churches think more creatively into the next century. Certainly the way in which we've written the creed now has that strong emphasis on economic rights, and with a kind of specificity that will allow us to say, yes, these are principles on which we agree, but also to push us to think, now, how do we enact that in specific policy? One of the things about the churches that is a real issue in the National Council is how to speak prophetically with at the same time holding together the unity of the church. We have to recognize that Christians will likely disagree on specific policy applications. Christians of good faith will say together, we are for the poor, but we may disagree about what we think about the minimum wage, for example, or something like that. On the other hand, there is that middle ground where we've been able to say, yes, we do affirm that a living wage for all people is a necessary way of affirming our commitment to the poor. If we can find that middle axiom, as we used to call it, which allows us to express not just broad principles, but not yet also specific legislative endorsement, but something in between, I think we will have pushed the churches to think more seriously about how to enact their commitments, not simply make them. It's interesting that the phrase social creed was developed in the life of the National Council from the Methodists, picked up, of course, by the Presbyterians and used, but also was endorsed by my own tradition, the Disciples of Christ. It developed in 1911 as a result of the work of the Federal Council, a commission on social issues, which adopted the social creed, even though my own tradition is one which says no creed but Christ, and is a non-creedal tradition, as we would say. We have argued over the years that the way in which the churches formulated creeds has been divisive when they are used as tests of fellowship. That is to say, if you don't believe 1, 2, 3, 4, then
coming to an axiom of agreement here on the fact that people need to have a living wage.
Which this was used.
I'm not opposed to that.
Was a series of guidelines, a framework for
when you make it a law, like minimum wage,
20th century found compelling,
that's really,
churches that are
I don't think my place to impose God's law on people.
It is not meant to say, if you don't believe this, you're out. It is meant to say, this is common ground we have hammered out together. Can we now think about how to enact this in our common life?
Yeah, with legislation.
The reason for producing a new social creed is not simply that 100 years have passed, and it's worth celebrating something that's 100 years old. It's more that we still find injustice in our world, and we are still compelled by the gospel to address it. 100 years ago, problems were being dealt with on a state level, and there was a need for more national legislation. So we introduced the income tax, and that helped to reduce inequality. Labor rights were introduced. The New Deal allowed for social protections. And later in the 20th century, laws were passed calling for equal rights for women and for people of all races. But today, the problems have become more global in scope. Beyond our country setting a good example, we need strong international treaties to reverse global warming. We need to end torture. We need to end occupation. We need to end trafficking. We should deal fairly with trade and migration, and we need to prevent wars and genocide. There are millions of people inside the church and outside of it who are looking to see what U.S. Christians really stand for.
I stand for a lot of that, but the problem I'm having with all of this is that you can't really legislate all this stuff, because ultimately I got to shut her off. Yeah. I don't disagree that it's all good stuff, but it gets messed up when you put it into law, because ultimately the Antichrist is going to come in and put things into law, and most of the people are going to follow it, man, and they're all going to think it's good when it isn't. And actually, the Bible's saying they're going to be persecuting the very people that God is trying to protect. So you got to be real careful about legislating things that you believe. That's why we have separation of church and state. We don't have to push in God we trust off the penny. We just need to watch what we're legislating, first of all. Secondly, pray for all the leaders in the world. And third, pray for each other. I've said this before, but you really can't fight a spiritual war with bullets. And unfortunately, our whole world is looking toward the bullet as the answer. And you got this big guy on top who's controlling everything. He roams around the earth like a lion. He's called the devil. And he basically pits me against you, and you against me, and us against them, and them against us. And I don't have any answers. I'm just telling you, I researched it all, and there's a lot of truth on both sides. The right-wing Christian and the left-wing Christian, they both have this commonality that they both love God, and they acknowledge God as their creator, and they want to help their brother and their sister on this world. So if we can get beyond that, I think the axiom that we can come to is we need to pray for each other and pray for the world. That's my opinion. You can find all of this on angrydude.net. There's a link out there for left-wing Christians where you find the things I just showed you. Or you can search it up on YouTube as well for that other guy I showed you in the beginning. That guy right there. Through Cost Media. That's where you'd want to go.